Today is Facebook's 10th birthday, co-founded by 20-year-old Mark Zuckerberg from his Harvard varsity dorm back in 2004. It was only intended really as a network between students. Now though, it boasts over 1 billion users worldwide, the popular site having its fair share of hiccups though. There have been some concerns about security and the privacy of users. Well, let's speak to a man who knows a lot more about this than me. It's Toby Shapshak, editor of Stuff magazine, who joins us. Toby, good to have you with us as always. So they're blowing out 10 candles on their birthday cake today, but is it really much of a celebration?
Well, it is. I mean, it is and it isn't, because, you know, from nowhere, Facebook has become kind of like the intranet of the internet. It's a walled-off garden that people can use. Everybody from my nieces and nephews who are teenagers up to my mother who's 85 use Facebook to stay in touch with their families. So it's gone from being a youthful social media network to a kind of everybody who's online, whatever age group, is using Facebook. I mean, I speak to people who have very basic feature phones and say to them, "Are you on the internet?" And they say no. And I say, "Are you on Facebook?" And they say yes. There's not even the assumption that Facebook is the internet. It's just where people communicate. The interesting thing is that there's been quite different dynamics than there were in the very beginning. In the very beginning, of course, it was young and hip, and you were a student and tech savvy, you had to know about it. And then, of course, the silver surfers discovered it, the parents and the grandparents, and suddenly they wanted to participate in what was going on. I mean, I said to my mother, "Do you want to know what your grandkids are up to?" And she said yes. So I created her Facebook profile, and off she goes.
You're about to get hate mail on your Facebook page for calling the older people silver surfers, by the way.
Indeed. Anyway, so what happens is now the teenagers, like, they don't want to be where their parents are. What teenager wants to jowl or hang out or party where their parents can see what they're doing? So they're leaving Facebook. Facebook's like too young for them.
So what is the new Facebook? What is Facebook's competition?
Things like WhatsApp is where people are going. Instagram is pretty parents free, I'm told. Messaging services, WeChat. People are doing that kind of thing. They're getting into group messaging services. They're going from very public to very private. So to my mind, there's always been something deeply unsettling about Facebook and their complete lack of respect or lack of regard for our privacy. Zuckerberg and co keep pushing the privacy boundaries. There's an outcry from the Facebook users, and then they withdraw it a bit, then they push it a bit further. You know, so every now and again the privacy settings change, and then you can't do something you could do before, or you've been exposed to this, or what. You never quite know what's public and what's secret and what's not. And I've never been much of a Facebook user up until about just over a year ago. My sister came out from the States with her 3 sons. You know, she hadn't been back for 27 years. I know, iconic number. And around that time, I started seeing how useful it was to see what the rest of the family was up to and what people were up to. And I worked out how to silence a few people and unfollow other people and mute.
But it is a lot of work. But
it's a lot of work. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you're very judicious and specific, you can have a very meaningful interaction with people whose lives you want to know about.
But in the end, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't really care about you keeping track of your family in the States, Toby. He wants to make money from you as well.
Exactly, but here's the thing, and I still don't know how it's going to change, is that there was a survey some time ago that said only 1 in 2,000 people looked at an advert using software that tracks your eye movements across a screen. And people weren't even looking at the adverts, let alone clicking on them, and yet that is the majority source of Facebook's revenue. And there was some doubt about a year ago about whether they would have any kind of future because their mobile revenue was so dismally low. However, the most recently announced results in the past week, for the first time, mobile revenue is more than half of what total is. So there is movement for them.
Yet they end up in a scandal again like they've got at the moment. This is the final question to you, Toby. And I've just learned this now, something called a NEC nomination, eNCA nomination. What is this about? Briefly,
well, it's just a meme. You know, what happened was, it says, the popular cause says there's a guy in Australia who downed a beer and did a video of himself and said, "This is me downing a beer." and he nominated 2 other people to down a beer, and then it got more and more complicated and more outrageous places, etc. Apparently some people died as a result, and then a South African got the nomination, and instead he said, instead of this being some silly little meme where people go, look how quickly I can down a beer in an exotic place, he filmed himself giving some sandwiches and food to someone standing at a car at a stop street or a robot, and that was how he turned it. And he said rather pay it forward, and very quickly a whole bunch of things. So amazingly enough, the Rainbow Nation magic has not been washed away entirely.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com.